No, the Jazz didn't get Cooper Flagg, but will they still draft a Duke Blue Devil? And should they? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin. I'm excited to be back with you, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As most of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcasting assistant and statistician, and lover of college hoops. So I've watched tons of these guys we're going to talk about. But most importantly, I want to make you as knowledgeable as possible about your Utah Jazz before the NBA draft and take you through some trade possibilities as well. Thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question is, what do you think about drafting one of Knueppel or Khaman Malauch? Tell me who you prefer, or if you're adamantly against both, I'll give you my thoughts coming up momentarily. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go ahead to FanDuel and place those bets and hopefully get rewarded kindly for it. So today on the show, like I said, I'm going to break down those two potential options at pick 5. That's Knueppel and Khaman Malauch, who played second and third fiddle to Cooper Flagg and his brilliance at Duke. But they've been really good for a long time and are well regarded by many teams, including the Jazz. And then I'll explain why I'd rather not take either of them at 5, but can try to convince you guys why the pick is okay and I can justify it. And lastly, we'll look at the possibility of trading for Jaren Jackson Jr., who seems to be more available. And this is a rumor that's floating about after the Desmond Bane trade. So let's dive right in and analyze that trade along with two potential prospects the Jazz can pick. So Knueppel and Khaman Malauch from the start of the season have been legit top 10 prospects. It's not like they're just rising up the board late and it's a total waste of a show saying that they're possibilities. I don't think the Jazz will take either of them. That's my personal opinion. But I think there's a real chance either of those guys goes in the top 5, whether it's to the Jazz or to another team. So I want to clarify that. They're legitimate candidates for the top 10 and legitimate candidates for the top 5. And the Jazz being in the top 5, this matters. So there are even some fans within Jazz Twitter and certainly all around draft Twitter. And recently, Tony Jones, beat writer for The Athletic, and an excellent one at that, he said Khaman Malauch factors into the equation even if Walker Kessler's on the team. And so those of you who say, oh, like Khaman Malauch doesn't matter unless we trade before the draft to the Lakers, I would say that he's probably gotten good sources that the Jazz are interested in Khaman Malauch. But let's talk about Knueppel first. He's the one who's more frequently seen mocked in the top 5, and he was the more productive player in collegiate basketball. So Knueppel is 6'6" in shoes. He's got a 6'6" wingspan, averaged 14 points, 4 rebounds, nearly 3 assists, shot 48% from the field, 40 from 3, and 91 from the free throw line. That's a shooter. Like, he can really shoot the basketball. But that's not what really makes him a top 5 pick. It's the good feel, the production at the age, and his savvy IQ, ability to do many things well. And I think when he played without Cooper Flagg in the ACC tournament, he was the ACC tournament MVP, he really upped his stock. So he's got great feel, excellent shooter, and he demonstrated upside as a primary creator when Cooper Flagg was out. And he also was very good feeding role man Khaman Malauch, along with playing off of the attacking close-ups the way the NBA is, advantage creation, playing 5-on-4, 4-on-3, making quick decisions. He does that all very, very well. He plays off 2 feet almost to a fault. Like, he always plays off 2 feet. I nicknamed him Jay Wright's Dream. You could insert another word if you'd like. I thought it was kind of a funny nickname for him. Jay Wright, of course, the coach of Villanova, prioritized playing off 2 feet, jump stopping, all that stuff. And Knueppel did so, and he had some guile, some step-ins off of playing off 2 feet. He was always composed near the rack. And, you know, the one thing that's floating around draft Twitter right now that's so interesting that people are loving is they're saying, oh, he's got a higher vertical than so many players. He's got a 36.5-inch vertical, and his shuttle run is quicker than that of VJ Edgecombe. So therefore, he's a tremendous athlete, and he's able to shoot the ball at 40% and be a 90-plus percentile guy in all the shooting categories. We're going to go through some of those. So is there an appeal to taking him? Absolutely. Do I see the Jazz doing so? And would I be happy? Probably not. And so here's where I get there. So the question to me is, let me rephrase it. How often will he be able to use that athletic testing combination with skill and guile, which is what I know him for, to do more than just be a role-playing shooter whose main role is to space the floor? My gripe is I don't see a star in Khan's future, and thus I don't like the pick because I don't want to go safe with a top 5 pick after taking swings at number 9 and 10. I think at the top 5, you've gone to see if you can get an all-star, because I don't think I was high on Cody, and many of you guys have criticized me for that. I said the averages that I saw in his prime were 14, 5, and 5, and I probably am vastly off. He was very underwhelming, but that's not a superstar. And for Taylor Hendricks, I was relatively low on the ability to impact the game immediately offensively, whereas everyone was saying, oh, he's an amazing shooter. I saw a guy who's a better athlete than everyone else and developed into a solid shooter. And I think he got a better shot throughout the season. But neither of those picks I loved as I did like the Cody Williams pick, but neither of them I foresaw as taking the ball and saying, yeah, I'm going to be a franchise-changing player. I thought they could help the franchise and they'd be helpers. I don't want to draft a helper when I'm drafting the top 5. That was the whole reason the Jazz were not good. They won 17 games for a reason, and they wanted Cooper Flagg. I don't want a guy who used Cooper Flagg's amazing abilities and was the beneficiary of Cooper Flagg. I want a guy who had the ball in his hands and was the reason for his team winning. That's the way I feel. So I don't see a star in the future for Knueppel. Could I be wrong? Sure. I'm a little dubious in terms of his upside, and thus I would not love the pick. Could he be good? But yes, absolutely. Could he be very good? Maybe. Could he be great? I don't see it. But here's the stats as to why it's probably a decent pick, because not all those top 5 picks are going to end up being all-stars. So if you get solid, and you're happy. So he's a 98th percentile spot-up shooter, 71st percentile off-ball shooter, 69th percentile in transition, which, as David talks about all the time, the everydayers know that means that he's a very solid athlete. And in isolation is the other one that measures athleticism. He was a 31st percentile pick and roll guy, which shocked me that it was that low, because you saw him throw these beautiful lobs feathered up there to Khaman Malauch. He's a 92nd percentile catch and shoot guy, 33rd percentile jump shooter off the dribble. So that to me means he doesn't have a stop and pop game, and he's not as adept coming off of screens with the dribble. It's more a movement shooter, and he's not a fly around movement shooter. He's more a set his feet guy. And at the rim, this is a very impressive and encouraging number. He's a 70th percentile finisher. That does include dunks, so his number with layups is a bit lower, but I'm impressed with his finishing and touch around the rim. To me, Knueppel's a glue guy, a guy who makes your team better with his intangibles, not the guy. So Knueppel, in summation, to me, is a high field player that defenses choose to guard high because he's an excellent shooter, but because of his shooting ability and his ability to attack closeouts, he forces them to play high, chase over those screens, and he uses that gravity to get downhill. And on the second level, he's able to score by putting his feet on the ground, jump stop, tilting, using his body, powering into defenders, and either scoring at the rim, which I think is going to be harder at the NBA level than against guys that are not as physically developed in college. And he was a 20-year-old, so therefore his body was more mature. It wasn't as impressive to me as if it were Cooper Flagg, who was just turning 18 during the season. But I do think he's still going to be able to get to the rim at the NBA level by using those closeouts. And I think his decision-making when he drew a second defender, when he put his feet on the ground on the jump stop, he drew a second defender and was an excellent passer. And that's the thing I do think helps. So at best, I think he's a kind of a secondary facilitator, a tertiary scorer. And I mean, very few teams have a Khaman Malauch in college basketball, someone you can throw those lobs to. And so the fact that the number was just 33rd percentile off the dribble and 31st percentile in pick and roll, it means I question some of that intermediate range, but I don't question his decision-making, his feel. So I think he's safe, but he's not an upside guy. And I don't know if you'd say taking a safe guy who has some deficiencies there at 5 is actually that safe of a pick in the long term. The other thing, though, about his passing, I dug up some numbers. He posts a 1.15 points per possession efficiency. That's 93rd percentile. And that basically means that whether he's got the ball in his hands, shooting or passing, the team, when he's involved in the play, is excellent. And when the defense is forced to commit, he's able to find the big or the helper. And I believe in his passing. I believe in his shooting. I actually believe in his defense more than most. I would tell you right now, I don't think he's necessarily going to be a better NBA defender than VJ. So don't misquote this and aggregate that. I think if you watch him play college basketball and VJ Edgecombe play college basketball, Knueppel was the better defender. He stayed in front of his man at a better rate and was beaten less frequently than VJ Edgecombe. He doesn't have the highlights of getting in passing lanes, running and posterizing players in transition, but he's a more effective, better college basketball player on both sides of the basketball. Now, VJ, I think, has more room to grow on each side, but I think that Khan and his athleticism was there more than people like to admit and say, oh, this is crazy. He didn't show that at all because he had a 36.5-inch vertical and he didn't show it. No, he gets a ton of rebounds. He's always in the right spot and he makes the right plays. I just don't know if I have enough belief in his upside to make that the number 5 pick. Some comparisons for you guys that I've seen, but I don't feel amazing about, or I've come up with myself, but I still don't love. One that's okay is Wally Szczerbiak, but I think he puts the ball on the floor a little better. And then a very poor man's Paul Pierce, maybe end of career Wizards Paul Pierce is one I saw out there. And the more I thought about it, I didn't think it was crazy, but I don't want that to be seen as, oh, Paul Pierce at the end of his career with the Celtics. No, that was a guy who was competing with LeBron James. No, not that. I'm not seeing that. I'm saying poor man's Paul Pierce at the end, and who's still a very serviceable player in the playoffs, but not the top player on a team. So for the Jazz, I don't like trying to play it safe at 5. I want a franchise changer. I've told you that forever. And with the likelihood being there, with the likelihood that there's going to be a guy like Trey or Ace, if one pick changes from the consensus of the top 5, and considering this draft doesn't seem to have a consensus, that seems very likely that it will. And maybe it's Khan going number 4. There's a lot of buzz saying that he's going to be number 4 at Charlotte. Maybe it's Malauch jumping to 3. I think the Jazz are best served choosing a guy like Trey Johnson or Ace Bailey as opposed to playing it safer for a guy like Knueppel. Who knows if he's actually safer than either of those guys. So coming up, I'm going to tell you guys all about Knueppel's college teammate, Khaman Malauch, who is a splendid human being, and I wish nothing but the best for, but I don't think I want on the Utah Jazz. But I'm going to tell you all about that coming up next, and maybe a little bit more on why he is such an interesting growth potential prospect. All that and more ahead of Locked On Jazz. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. We talked about Tyrese Halliburton and his clutch performances. He's been great all postseason. So if you've been tracking, maybe he's the guy you want to place a bet on. Or better yet, you got to read on who's heating up, or it's clutch time. Why not back up the same game parlay and you say Tyrese Halliburton to score over in just the fourth quarter alone? So how could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? Well, that sounds like a splendid deal to me. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here, and we're talking about the Blue Devils from Duke. We didn't get Cooper Flagg, but could the Jazz have a different Duke Blue Devil heading their way? We talked about Khan. Khan, to me, is more likely to be taken at 5 than Khaman Malauch, and maybe even taken before 5 if the Charlotte Hornets really, really like him. But Khaman Malauch is really intriguing to me, and I'm going to tell you why. So Khaman Malauch, for those of you who don't know, is from South Sudan and started basketball late. We're going to take you through his story and then explain why the Jazz would consider Khaman Malauch even with Walker Kessler on the team. At 14 years old, it was his first time playing organized basketball. At 16, Malauch became the 3rd youngest player ever to play in the FIBA World Cup. The following summer, he was by a wide margin the youngest competitor in the Olympics, and he actually drained a jump shot in Anthony Davis's face, and his team was within 1 point of beating Team USA in the qualifiers, or the tune-up for the Olympics. So he's had several iterations of experience change in his lifetime of basketball, which has been more abbreviated than any other player in this class. And in those 4 years alone, we're still at the earliest stage of his career. There's still so many rudimentary things that you're fine-tuning. and figuring out how to be effective, except he's been effective throughout his career already. Malauach has these traits that are undeniable. He's got a 9'8" standing reach, which is 1 inch longer than Victor Wembanyama's and 1 inch shorter than Rudy Gobert's. It's on par with Mark Williams, who I think has the longest one in the NBA. And his touch is really good for his size. So we'll get to the reasons here. But Khaman Malauch, the thing that I want to talk about is the Jazz have Walker Kessler. Why would you take Malauch? Because Walker Kessler is going to draw a ton of attraction. And if you can find someone that you think is serviceable replacement, if maybe even have more traits and upside, then there's a world where it makes sense to take that. If the Jazz have Khaman Malauch and Walker Kessler, I don't necessarily see the reason. So I disagree with the logic of, okay, Khaman Malauch, best player available. And if that is the board, I typically am best player available all the way. I think it's too redundant in an era where shooting matters so much to have he and Walker Kessler both patrol the paint and become deficient in terms of initiating skill sets that the Jazz would have. I mean, you could play him off the bench and you'd be fine. You could play him along with Kyle Filipowski and you'd have a lot of minutes from youthful bigs that complement each other very well. I wouldn't be terribly mad because I really do believe in his upside, and I think his floor is higher than others. So let's get back to the why for Khaman Malauch. His touch is really, really good for his size. He's a good free throw shooter, shooting 76% already. He can gently finish with either hand, finish lobs, and he can flush them home, of course, because he's huge and he's got a tremendous long reach. And then the coordination is what stands out to me. You see so many people, and maybe not Jazz fans, but so many people watch Rudy Gobert and they say, oh, he's so uncoordinated, he's so inept offensively. And Jazz fans are going to be like, oh, you don't know about his vertical gravity and how much he is impactful because of the pick and rolls and how much the defense has to bend and shift to his gravity because he can elevate to reach places no one else can. So you need to tag the roll man and it opens up the weak side corner. Like, we understand it all. Like, I love basketball, and that's really important stuff. Quinn Snyder was on the cutting edge of that. But Rudy Gobert, the plain simple fact is he's not as coordinated as many centers in the NBA. What he lacks for coordination, he's excellent in other regards, and that's why he's far better than most centers in the NBA. Khaman Malauch is of that cloth in terms of the rare traits that Rudy Gobert has, but he's got significantly better touch and better hands. So he's got the coordination to catch the passes from crazy angles. He's able to set screens better than you expect someone who's just 4 years in the NBA. That was something that Rudy Gobert needed so much help from Alex Jensen and the coaching staff. And Quinn Snyder harped on all the time how good of a screen setter he was. That was something that Walker Kessler, frankly, was pretty poor at when he came into the NBA with screen setting. That was something that Will Hardy was hard on him about and said he needed to get better in his sophomore slump. And his scoring efficiency as a finisher out of the pick and roll is ridiculously high. He's 99th percentile as a play finisher in the pick and rolls as a freshman. And that's against physical guys. Yeah, he's young, but he's so young in terms of basketball. The fact he was able to finish that well and that adeptly is very interesting to me. And if you look at all the big men of the past decade, his finishing is better than just about all of theirs. In fact, pretty much every big man that you've had in the first round, but especially lottery big men who typically are younger. And then players of Malauach's archetype typically aren't seen as, I should say, they aren't seen as defenders that have a lot of room to grow. They kind of are what they are. But the way he guards the pick and roll could be more of a ceiling thing as opposed to like, oh, yeah, he's going to be a good defender. Like, we know that as a given. Like, we know that as a given, but his ceiling is that he can get so much better on defense as he matures. He can get really, really low on defense in his defensive stance without losing range of motion. And he's able to contest from behind. He can wall up from in front. And there's almost this cockiness to the way that Malauach guards. It's that he believes he can guard at the level of the screen and pick up shifty ball handlers 27 feet from the hoop. He guarded Mark Sears. Like, you want best film of any prospect in the entire year? Watch Alabama, the Alabama game that Duke played in the Elite Eight. Everyone's eyes are going to be on Cooper Flagg, but the best player in that game, the most impactful player, best performance was Khaman Malauch. Khaman Malauch was locking down an All-American fifth-year point guard. And he was able to play at the level of screens because he thinks he can. And even when he's beaten, and he tries his best to dance on the perimeter with those guards because he thinks he can. And even if he is beaten, he's got his recovery speed that's alarming. He can spin around, and he's got the ridiculous reach, and he jumps, and his timing's pretty good, and he gets back into play. So he's going to be a good drop coverage big. That much we know. He's going to be a good rim protector, someone who can finish near the rim. That much we know. But can he switch and make the teams really have to work and try to get by him and still impact the play down low? Can he be employed in different ways than what Rudy Gobert and many of these guys are typically known for their drop coverage? And honestly, Jazz fans know this because David Locke is a huge Rudy Gobert defender, and he gives good stats. But basically, Rudy Gobert was a great switch defender because he's an amazing recovery guy. That's what Khaman Malauch possesses. So Jazz fans should be uniquely equipped to see what Khaman Malauch can do. And then there's the fact he's a 99th percentile pick and roll finisher on the roll, being the roll man, not the ball handler. The Jazz have Walker Kessler, so I don't think the Jazz take him, and I would be a little disappointed if the Jazz took him. But maybe that allows for flexibility to trade for the right deal, or get more assets, and have a guy who's got traits that make him on a trajectory similar with Walker Kessler, maybe better. I personally am a big believer in Walker Kessler now, having seen him for the 3 seasons of his career. I've been at all the Jazz games, and I've worked there. I've looked at all the stats, and he's an amazing offensive rebounder. He's become a better finisher. He's got tremendous work ethic. I don't necessarily think I want to take Khaman Malauch, but Khaman Malauch might be the best human in this draft, or maybe the best human in the NBA as soon as he steps in. You watch him talk to his teammates, and he sings these sea shanties about his teammates for their birthdays, and he hosts all these chants, and he's got a smile on his face that looks like a little kid having fun, and it's enamoring to see so many people so serious about basketball and all this, and then you see someone who's working his tail off for 4 years of basketball, but has his joy still presently displayed on his face, and works hard and is an excellent player all the same. So while I would not love the pick for the skill set and because of what the Jazz already have, I won't be mad because I'd love to see Khaman Malauch and hear his story presently displayed frequently on what the Jazz talk about. Like it makes me smile to hear him speak. And I think he's got more of an upside than many people even thought. And I think it's more likely he's a star than Knueppel, but he's got a lower floor than Khan. And I actually think his floor is deceptively high, even as is, because he's so moldable as a player right now that you'd think his floor is low. But honestly, I think he's pretty effective as is. His floor is probably higher than Derek Queen's, who he's compared to frequently as fellow freshman bigs, but he's further off from what he can be because he's got lower basketball time. It's like age is different, but basketball age speaks volumes to me. And I think he's got a higher floor than I expected, and he's got a high ceiling. Like Derek Queen to me has a very high ceiling, but his floor may be far. And somehow Khaman Malauch, who's so far from what he can be, and which would speak to ceiling typically, means that his floor is actually slightly ahead of what I think Queen's is, despite it being the opposite in your mind. Like you'd think, oh, this guy's a project, therefore his floor is low. Whereas Queen, you know what you're getting. You just got to find the right fit. I think he's got a higher floor than Queen. I think the ceiling could be really high. I think he'll go higher in the draft than Derek Queen. And I would not be stunned to see him in the top 5. I'd be shocked if the Jazz take him. Conclusion being, I wouldn't take him over Trey Johnson. I wouldn't take him over Bailey. I probably wouldn't even take him over Fears. But he has unique traits, and the Jazz are keenly aware of what those traits can do for a team, having seen Rudy Gobert, watching him control an entire side of the basketball and by himself perpetuate a team that with no business being a top 5 defensive team into top 5 of defensive ratings. So that's the pitch for Khaman Malauch. Let me know what you guys think. Would you take Khaman Malauch or Knueppel at 5? And which one do you guys prefer? We'll talk about that. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a guy who's won Defensive Player of the Year already. That's Jaren Jackson Jr. Could the Jazz lure him away from Memphis? All that and more coming up next on Locked On Jazz. Murdoch Hyundais have been in Utah for over 80 years, and that is the longevity you can depend upon. And so are the people that work for Murdoch Hyundai. They're fantastic, and the cars are just as dependable and excellent prices, bang for your buck, safety features, bells, whistles, and all. I've driven the Tucson, so I loved it. And you turn left, and all of a sudden you can see the road on your left illuminated in the mirror, as well as the entire mirror. They also have the Apple Play, everything you want in the screens. The Kona, the Tucson, the Santa Fe, and the Palisade are all decked out and fantastic. And they've got the new Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6, which are amazing. The 6 is electric, looks like a Porsche, and just won the World Car of the Year. So make sure to check out Murdoch Hyundai. They have the latest inventory up to date on their website, so you can talk to the representatives there, and you can find what you want on the website. And there are 3 locations in Linden, Murray, and Logan. And I've worked with the people in Murray and couldn't recommend them highly enough. And tell them you listen to Locked On Jazz, and they'll take great care of you because they love Locked On Jazz, and you guys will love them. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a player I don't think will be traded without a enormous haul coming back. But Desmond Bane created such a he found a way to make himself both become underrated in the sense of, oh, people are saying Memphis won the trade, even though they just lost a guy of Desmond Bane's caliber, and he went to a team that perfectly suits what he does well, and he suits what they need desperately. And somehow people are saying Memphis won the trade. So it becomes underrating what Desmond Bane is as a player, but also maybe overrating what he is as a player at the same time, and in saying, wow, Desmond Bane yields that much in return. So think about what Jaren Jackson may warrant, because Jaren Jackson's a better player than Desmond Bane. And you know what's crazy is I was talking about this very briefly on yesterday's episode, so the everydayers know about this. But Desmond Bane is a really good basketball player. I'd say Lauri Markkanen is slightly better than Desmond Bane, and I would say Jaren Jackson slightly better than Lauri Markkanen. I got some flack for that in the YouTube comments, and I don't mind. Honestly, if you got a good reason for it, let me know what it is. So pop that in the comments as well. But I think Jaren Jackson Jr. being the Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago and one of the best defenders in the world year in, year out, a good shooter, someone who can score with the back to the basket, put the ball on the deck, and play on a winning team. And you know what his ward is he's not a very good rebounder. Like, he's not. But you play him next to a center, which is how the Jazz are typically constructed, and you put him at the 4, he is fantastic. So that would be my contention, that he's a better player than Lauri and Desmond Bane. Jaren Jackson Jr. trade was spoken about on Simmons's pod after Bane was traded. I spoke about that the other day, and I told you he could be dealt as the Grizzlies, I think, have waved the white flag. And they're probably not fully rebuilding. I don't think you quite get rid of all of the guys, Jaren, Ja, and what they've built there. But they're at least retooling, and I think are open to discussion of if Desmond Bane can get you that many picks back, and they don't think they're that close right now, having won 48 games, I think they could be thinking, we want to try to, while these drafts are really valuable, try to be bad enough to get a star organically like they did with Ja Morant, and see what you can get in the draft while having some youthful pieces that will be under tame contracts. The Jazz have that compelling offer because they have a perennial Defensive Player of the Year in Jaren Jackson, coupled with a guy like Walker Kessler. Like, that's a defensive front court that really is difficult to score on, and they complement each other very well. Walker Kessler cleans up the glass. He had a 16% offensive rebound rate. That was the best in the NBA. He rebounds the ball. He runs the floor. He protects the rim, and it allows Jaren to shoot threes and take advantage of mismatches against smaller defenders. They fit well. Like, I think there's a real world where the Jazz say, you know what, we can put together a compelling offer, and it's worth a shot because we'll have such a good player that's a perennial Defensive Player of the Year contender, make us defensively so much better than we have been, where we have been inept for years in and years out. The last 3 years, the Jazz have been horrible on defense. And some of it has to do with not wanting to be great in total for parts of the season. But I think part of it is the Jazz just don't have enough good individual defenders, and that gives you a great one. Now, not only is he the Defensive Player of the Year, but he scores 20 plus per game, can be inside and outside, can post up. And I think there's frameworks that work. The one that was floated on the Simmons pod, he said the 5th pick, which would be pick number 5, which is the Trey Johnsons, the Ace Bailey, whatever it is. So think of that guy not being on the Jazz. John Collins, who had a great year last year, underrated one, in fact, and future picks. I think because you're giving a 5th pick, which is such a luxury in today's NBA, that you would have to give up fewer future picks than what maybe Orlando had to do for Bane. So let's think of it as 5th pick, Collins, and 3 picks, and you can make the math work however you'd like. Do you make that trade? I'm not sure. And I love Jaren Jackson Jr. I've loved him since he was in the draft. And you guys may think Lauri's better, and if you do, that probably means you don't want the Jaren Jackson. I think Jaren's better than Lauri, and he's a better defender. I gave you all the reasons already. But the question I would have as to why I'd be hesitant would be, would we be too good to land within the top 8 picks next year? because we have a top 8 protected pick. And I think he's not good enough to pull the trigger and say, yeah, we're ready to contend, because the West is that good. And then you still need someone to be the guy with the ball in the hands. But at the same time, is there a world that the Jazz find a guy like Jaren, Lauri, and keep Kessler on board? They hopefully pick a good player at 21 and find a way to internally develop, build the team how they want, and still pick within the top 8? Or do you have to thread the needle? Is it tough? Yes, it's doable, though, because I don't know if the Jazz would be good enough, and it's certainly not a guarantee that they'd have tremendous success with that roster first year and still a lot of change in the backcourt. You don't know who's the best player of the youthful guys in the backcourt. Is it Keontae George? Is it Isaiah Collier? How much will Filipowski factor in? There's a lot of stuff that still would need to be figured out. And so I think the Jazz could thread the needle and have Jaren Jackson and still get a top 8 pick. I would say it's worth investigating that opportunity. And also, his game's complementary. He doesn't win the games by himself, but he's a very good winning basketball player when you have a player like Ja Morant as the engine. The Jazz lack a Ja Morant. I think he'd fit splendidly with Collier, let Collier's penetration create for the kickouts to Jackson and have his defense clean up for a lot of mistakes that the Jazz make. But the West is so good that he could come to Utah and the Jazz could keep Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, and the Jazz still would be 12th best team in the West. I don't think that's crazy at all. I think Phoenix is blowing it up. They probably won't have Kevin Durant back. So I think Phoenix, I think there's an argument the Jazz could, if they make that trade, be on the same level as Portland. I don't think that the Jazz will be as bad as teams intentionally losing, but there's not many of those. Like the Spurs are probably going to be better than Jazz because Wembanyama is going to keep getting better, and he's not going to get hurt, hopefully. I hope he continues to play. And they add in second-year Castle. They add in the second pick. They probably make a trade to win now. And that's a team that the Jazz got leapfrogged by. I think the Jazz could be in a position to be the 6th or 7th worst record in the NBA because the NBA, especially in the Western Conference, is so good. And that's where I think it's worthwhile to make this trade, because you end up with 2 valuable players that are really, really conducive to winning, and you just need to find that one guy. And you got to find a player. And what's the likelihood you're going to find someone better than Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5th pick and better than Jaren Jackson Jr. next year in a time frame? Because the Jazz fans are getting impatient. So am I. I think it's worthwhile to try to make this move because I don't think it eliminates you from the possibility of having another top 8 pick. And that's where you try to do it. You need enough cracks at the bat. I'm all for getting the star. I don't think you need to skip steps and get the star. I don't want to trade for assets like I was saying is a possibility. I don't want to pick every time and end up being in purgatory forever with mediocre picks. The Jazz tried to be bad this year. They were bad. They have a top 5 pick. I still think they should probably take that pick, but I'd certainly consider the opportunity that has arisen with Jaren Jackson Jr. being a suitable trade target. So let me know what you guys think. Can the Jazz get a young all-star caliber player for pennies on the dollar due to desperation? And that would be what Jaren Jackson Jr. is. And then the follow-up question would be, if you're against it, what level of player makes you guys comfortable in dealing for a big-time player or any player at all that you think is being undervalued enough that the Jazz should make the trade and risk that top 8 protected pick? So thank you once again for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the 2025 Locked On NBA mock draft, a 5-episode series with the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from NBA experts to college experts and NBA draft experts. Find the 2025 Locked On NBA mock draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And once again, thank you guys for tuning in. Tomorrow on the show, Andy Larson to talk about the 5th pick. He is higher on VJ Edgecombe than I am. We're going to talk about VJ Edgecombe versus Trey Johnson, perhaps more on Ace Bailey, and then what trades are possible for the Jazz to pursue. What names is he hearing about, and what names would he personally do? And then the day after that, we're going to talk Tony Jones and listen to the latest rumors that Tony's hearing about. So got a couple fun episodes on deck. Thank you guys for listening each and every day, and I appreciate it greatly, and I will be back with you tomorrow.